Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Friday Review of Apps. Today we're going to be looking at 4 apps. We're getting some really bad feedback on our end, so I'm going to pause for a second while we try and figure out the echo. I suspect it's the output from... Oh, it looks like we're okay. Okay, thank you, Roman, for... No, it's still really bad.
I am muted, by the way.
Tab that you have open.
Oh, no wonder we've got a very, very lengthy delay.
There we go. All right, so we're back at it. Thank you, everyone, for bearing with us. So, yes, it is the Friday Review of Apps. We're going to take a look at 4 apps, hopefully, today. And after us, Ian and Dan are going to sit in and take a look at some games. Today, rather than Fred, I've got a colleague from the UX team, Jens.
Hi guys.
Thank you for joining us.
I'm Jens, working on the Android UX team in our action design.
So hopefully we're going to have some really useful feedback for you all, specifically looking at UX, which is what we tend to focus on. And we've also got Evil Roman dialing in from San Francisco today.
Howdy, howdy.
Thank you for joining us, Roman. And that's some impressive facial hair for a single day's growth. Okay, so let's kick off. We're going to start by having a look at an app that we had on our agenda last week. We didn't quite get around to looking at. It's Beautiful Notes, and I'm going to have a look at it on my phone, my cleanly factory reset Galaxy Nexus. All right, there we are. Perfect. So you can see straight away, well, as we open it up, we don't have any notes yet. So the idea behind this is that it's an app which helps you take notes, a sort of simple concept, but they try and do it in a particularly attractive way, self-described, beautiful notes. Let's see, move this over here. Perfect. So right away you can see that you've got this. You may not be able to see very well on the video, but it's kind of got this faux wood background, and then sort of the notes sit on top of that. Now I know, Roman, you've talked about this effect of trying to simulate real-life objects in apps before. What are your feelings on that?
Well, first of all, before I talk, I want to make sure that there's no echo coming from me. Everything okay?
We're all golden.
Okay. So, I mean, in general, there's, I don't want to say only 2 schools of thought, but I guess two potential schools of thought in design. And one is let's make everything look like real live objects and have wood in the background and real kind of crumply paper effects and things like that. And the other is let's go for a more kind of like simple, not I don't want to say utilitarian, but more minimalist style. And these aren't, of course, the only 2, but if you were to compare something like Hollow versus something like the design that Beautiful Notes evokes, they are different. And so there's it's definitely a design decision. There's no saying that one is 100% correct and the other is wrong. But I think on Android we generally prefer the latter, kind of more the minimal, the more kind of hollow style. And we have Android design that talks about all the design philosophy behind it and why it makes sense and things like that. But we get to the end of the day is I think the most important thing is, do users get it, do users understand it, and is it fast? And I think that the more visual complexity you add to an app in general, the slower it gets, the potentially more confusing it gets, and so that's just one thing to watch out for. In general, when I looked at this app on a tablet, on a phone, the big problem wasn't so much with the visual effects and the styling. The big problem with me was the perceived latency. For example, one of my pieces of feedback was when you rotate the tablet from portrait into landscape, there's this kind of long animation that takes place that kind of takes me out of my context. I don't know if you'll see it on a phone. Yeah, you will. So it kind of it takes a little too long for me, I think. And I'd rather the developer, I'd say, spent more time on ensuring that, for example, like the currently selected note was still highlighted across orientation changes rather than having this kind of big animation. So I think in general there's nothing, I guess, wrong with the styling, but I think that it can add the perceived latency, add the visual complexity that slows down the app. So that's kind of my overall feelings.
Yeah, I felt the same way. That was the biggest sort of general piece of feedback I had for the developers of this, was that it seems really slow. That rotational latency is a great example because it's probably about 5 seconds from when you turn it around. So I'll show you here. When you turn it, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's like 7 seconds before you get from where you were to exactly the same place in the UI where you're ready here to tap something. Let's see, so we can go through and you see the same sort of thing. So, and similarly as well, I found that when I was doing this rotation, it was sort of losing state. So you don't go back to where you were. So I don't know if you sort of saw the workflow I was doing there, but I had already started to create a new note, and simply by rotating the screen from landscape back to portrait, it's gone back to the beginning. So the big thing you want to do is you always want to be maintaining state for your application when people switch in and out of it, but that's particularly the case when you're doing rotations. There shouldn't be a difference between, rotating the phone shouldn't cause you to lose state. You shouldn't have to start again from where you were. So that's a sort of a key piece of feedback.
Yeah, there's one more thing I wanted to add around the styling. So on a tablet, and I can't really show it here, but the styling I feel like is also incomplete. Most of the app has this kind of like faux wood effect and the paper stacks in the background, but then there's parts of it that are kind of completely unstyled. Like, for example, I feel like the core part of the experience of writing notes and taking notes is the note view and the note edit text box itself, and that was pretty much not really given any love. It's using the default font, which is fine, but things like line spacing, things like padding, things like font size, those are fundamental in any Note app, and I feel like that was something that wasn't really touched on. Additionally, the icons at the right of the screen, they're using the built-in framework icons. The first problem with that is that the framework icons that come in Android.r.ic_menu_ whatever, those aren't great to use. It's better to use the Android design, the icons available in Android design. But in general, those icons are also designed for Holo. So the iconography and the styling, those are two separate things. So in this app, what I would recommend is keeping the core shapes of the icons. Like, for example, share should still be those 3 circles, but apply the styling that fits in with your app. It feels kind of too disparate, those two separate kind of styles between the app and those icons. So it's another point of feedback there.
Okay, that's a good point. So we've got the app up on a tablet here at the moment. So this is what you were referring to here. Obviously, you can see the icons on the side here, which, yeah, as you say, look good, but shouldn't be exactly the same ones. And was this the bit which you were talking about, which needed more love? So the actual text editor for each note.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have multiple lines of text here, you'll notice that there's I think it's like a 1.0 or 1.1 or something line spacing. So I mean, if you have like a really long line and it starts wrapping, it just doesn't. It feels a bit, I don't want to say unprofessional, but it feels like more love should have been given here. Clearly, the design team for this app put in a lot of effort into kind of the Chrome around this fundamental kind of centerpiece, but I think that more love should be given to the actual note-taking experience.
Yeah, that's a fair call. Yeah, good comment. The other thing that I noticed as well, if we switch back to the phone, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this very well, but the icons, here we are. So the icons that you've got for creating a new note, search, these sorts of things all down here are actually quite low res. So they look bad on this HDPI screen. If you compare that to the tablet actually has the right high-res icons, so they are visible. So they're down here. So they do exist. So this might just be a simple case of putting the right icons into the right folders, so that all devices get the right icons. But they definitely look grainy here. Also, I've made a note here that the action bar appears inconsistent. So I'm not entirely sure what I meant by that. So that looks fine. Let's see, but I guess it's little things like what I would expect to see on this screen is a way to get back to the previous screen, to the main menu, or to the home screen, something like that. And I don't have anything on the action bar to help me do that. I'm pretty sure if I hit back, no, back exits. So that's a little bit confusing. So I don't know how to get from sort of a new note that I've just edited back to the main screen. It's not entirely clear. I think what I'm supposed to do is hit.
Seems like in that fragment transaction they're missing an add to backstack call and not
Yeah.
updating the action bar accordingly.
Looks that way, yeah. So I think I need to save a note or compose note. Sending it to email. Nice. Yeah, so I think in some cases it will work, but then in others it doesn't. And that's definitely confusing. You want the action bar to have a nice, consistent workflow so that you always know how to go from where you are at the moment back to the main menu, or at least to somewhere where you can navigate to other places. Search is fair enough. Some of these icons as well have the problem of it not being clear exactly what they mean. I don't know what this tick box does.
Yeah, and it's unclear. So some of those icons are tab-like, almost like radio buttons, and some are actions. So
Gotcha.
yeah, it's not quite clear what they do. The other thing I should mention here is, I guess for the first time in Android 4.0, you saw this kind of tooltip behavior. So when you long press on an action in the action bar, you get a quick toast-like tooltip that indicates what it is. It's totally fine to use that for these types of buttons where the iconography isn't perfect. And in general, obviously, improve iconography, test iconography on people from different demographics to make sure that it makes sense to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I mean, I think the biggest overall criticism I had were two. One was that the navigation is confusing. It's hard to figure out where you are, what actions you should take to get things to happen. And for all the great UI Chrome, it's actually quite difficult to see. Well, it's not difficult. I should say it's really slow. It's slow. It's laggy. You're interrupting the flow of trying to just create, to have this experience, create simple notes. It's all being slowed down by the UI. So I think that would be my main sort of feedback, is to make it faster, even if that means cutting away from some of the fancy Chrome, just to make it a faster, easy to use experience, and try and create a navigation structure that's really easy for people to understand.
I think one of the things that I noticed, which creates tension, which has to do with the general styling of the app, is when you click here on the search dialog, and you get a system dialog that matches in no shape or form with the general styling of the app, and it creates this visual tension that makes the user think, am I even still in the same task? Am I even still doing the same thing?
Yeah, it feels like it's an interruption, like I've done something wrong because I get the system dialog. And in fact, there's something like search. A better approach would be to just use a search view. Put that into your action bar, so that you can effectively do that. So rather than having this search, you would end up with a search view which would come along the top. So yeah, that's probably a good idea, a way to try and make it more of a cohesive experience. Okay. All right, let's move on. I haven't spent as much time this week looking at all of the apps ahead of time, so this is going to be a bit of a learning experience for us as well as we go through these. But let's have a look at GApps Launcher. So let's see, if I download this and open it up, the first thing I get is this big screen of text, which I believe tells me what the app is and how I'm supposed to use it. So GApps Launcher is in fact a widget, a home screen widget. And this is the way that they've gone to try and explain what it is and how it works. So this is an interesting approach, putting it all, having a partially, it's not even a full screen activity pop up when you hit the launcher to tell you to install the widget. It's not necessarily a bad approach, though I would probably not have gone with a partial activity. I would have just maybe made it an activity. But I don't know, is there any guidance around that? Is that just a personal opinion thing? What do you guys think?
Oh, sorry, Jens, I should mention, it's kind of hard to hear you, so you may want to put the mic a little closer to you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would opt for a full screen activity here for configuration interfaces. That usually seems to work best. Actually, from here, it might also be a good idea. I don't know if that's technically possible to guide users directly to the place where widgets are actually stored in the All Apps folder, because I noticed that the text here is actually a little bit incorrect, at least for as far as ICS is concerned.
That's right. It gives the wrong instructions.
Yeah, you can't really long press on the home screen on the home panels anymore in order to access widgets. So that might be something you want to fix.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something to consider as well. I mean, you can just go as simple as just changing the text for different versions, or perhaps, you know, it's a slightly riskier approach, but assume that people who have downloaded it know how to install widgets for their phone, and sort of just say, this is a widget, you know, this is how you go and install it, rather than sort of trying to give the detailed instructions for someone who perhaps this is the first time they've installed a widget. If so, it seems less likely that they would have installed your app to begin with. Also, if you are going to be providing this information, so you've kind of got an about at the top, and then the installation instructions, and then, you know, people you want to say thank you to. It's perfectly appropriate to say thanks to everyone, but what it means is that you've actually now, even on this high-density screen, you've got scrollable text. I looked at this and my eyes glazed over. It's like looking at a terms of service thing. You just want to know how to get started. So I try and make this as concise as possible, even if it's just, this is a widget, this is what it does, you know, please go to the app launcher or long press on the home screen to install, and kind of leave it at that. So we'll close that off now. So I've let's see, we might follow those instructions. We'll go widgets, we'll add one to the home screen now. So here we are, GApps launcher, we'll install a 2x2, drop that on the home screen. So that opens up a configuration activity, which is the right way of doing this. And I believe it's going to show us a preview of what it's going to look like along the top. And then down here, it's providing us with all the different, I guess, Google applications which you can have, and decide whether it opens the app or a web page, and which ones it displays. So we can add news to that. And you can see that the real-time preview is updating to show us the different apps which it's providing. So I guess this is going to provide us shortcuts to everything from home screen, which is handy. Now, I would say that the workflow here is a little bit confused. So you've got the preview at the top, then you've got an options button. So transparent is going to decide whether it has a background, and we put it on the home screen, and then save and cancel to, I guess, either abort creating the widget or to create the widget. And then underneath, you've got the configuration to select which ones they are. Now, from a workflow perspective, it's kind of back to front upside down. You know, you're kind of starting at the bottom and then going back up into the middle and referring to the top. So it all kind of seems a little bit confused to me. You know, from a UX perspective, what would you say would be the right order to put this stuff together?
Well, I would say that the save cancel probably should be at the bottom. Mm-hmm. On a fixed bar, so that it doesn't scroll out of space, because you have a relatively lengthy configuration, you know, number of apps in here that you can configure onto the panel. So probably at the bottom makes sense. If you have a regular action bar at the top here, you might as well also use save cancel in the action bar. So we do that in a couple of places. So, for example, if you create a new contact, you can observe that, you know, accepting the new contact or canceling out of it is accessible through the action bar. So that's another, you know, space-efficient and consistent place of displaying that functionality.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. And then you're not actually using up any extra space, right? In fact, if you put it in the action bar, then you're gaining space. And if you are putting it underneath, it's just removed. The other thing I'll point out as well, it's really nice styling, but we're not using hollow styling here, which is unfortunate. It would be nice to see this menu button go away. It's got an about, which I guess brings up the same thing at the beginning. You know, that would be better as an action bar item if you can have it in there. But you definitely don't want the menu button of shame, as we like to call it. And if you had all of this hollow themed, then these buttons would look a lot nicer as well. It would just sort of feel like a more native sort of application. Okay, so let's hit save, and it's going to create our home screen widget.
Well, the other thing I wanted to mention, one missed opportunity maybe here is in the configuration interface to give the users an opportunity to shuffle the icons around so that they're in an order that they prefer. That doesn't seem to be possible right now.
Yeah, no, you're right. I don't think that there is a way, unless it's defined by the order in which you add them. But I don't think so. I think it's just a set order. So yeah, that would be really nice to be able to change the order of the items that we've got in there.
Because when I put this together, I activated some, then deactivated them, and that seemed to determine the order as you said. But it's nice, once you're done, then to do a final pass and how it exactly should look like.
Very cool. Okay, so perfect. So now we have the widget. So we're going to go back to the home screen here, and you can see how it's all laid out. Now, the first thing that I would comment on, so this obviously is for Google Apps, but if you were doing something similar for any other company, I'd be really cautious about using people's trademarks. So you've got logos and icons, which in this case are all Google properties. I'm not sure whether that breaks any terms of service, but I'd definitely be, I'd be reluctant about doing that sort of thing. So I'd be very careful before you're using sort of names and logos and things which belong to other companies. Generally speaking, it's poor practice to do anything in Google Play or anything like this where you're relying on other people's brands to sort of promote your product. Obviously, in this case, you're doing so to make it easy for people to get access to these, which seems reasonable enough. But yeah, just a note of caution, I think, whenever using someone else's brands. In terms of the layouts themselves, so I've got two widgets here, one 2x2, which is the one we just configured with the background, the one underneath, which is sort of a smaller 1x1 without the background. They look nice, reasonably well laid out. There's a bit of overlap in the 2x2. Some of the icons seem a little bit close together.
That's what I was thinking. They're a little bit tightly packed. And I think this app would be a good opportunity of actually having resizable widgets as well.
Absolutely.
So that you can space the widgets a little bit better and adjust them, to the size of your home screen as you look at it in the context of your home screen.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is like Jan says, a perfect example to be able to do the resizable home screen widget so that they just open up, and theoretically then you could add more things to it as it expands and gets bigger. There's a little configuration icon which you can maybe just make out, which is impossible to touch.
Right.
Oops. Yeah. So once you touch that, you get back in and you can configure it, but it's really hard to touch that. So I'd consider trying to make that a more easily touchable touch target.
I think it's a direct effect of how tightly packed everything is.
Yeah.
So if you space it a little bit more evenly, then you also have a little bit more room for the configuration icon.
Perfect. Is the developer for G-Apps Launcher online by any chance? No? Okay. Just thought I'd check before we move on. But yeah, so I think that's the main points of feedback.
I had some suggestions as well.
You got some comments? Perfect.
Yeah, and they're very quick, but they very much fall in line with what you guys are saying. But just here's kind of like an idea of how this can work in an Android 3.0 and later world. Basically, you have just one widget, right? You don't have the 2x2, 4x1, 2x1, whatever. You just have one widget. And in the configuration, you specify what size it is, how many rows of icons, how many columns of icons it is, and then basically it fits that kind of nested linear layout or whatever into whatever size the user determines. So you could potentially have a 4x4 and a 5x5, or a 2x2 and a 4x4, whatever you want, right? And basically, once you specify in that setup wizard or that configuration step how many rows and columns of icons you want, you should then be able to just drag and drop from kind of a list of items at the bottom right into the cell that you want. And then right now it has things like application and web page, so you can have like Google Search application, Google Search web page. Those should really just be two separate icons that you can drag in there. So you can drag in the Google Search application into one of the cells, and then the Google, Google Search, Google.com application or web page into one of the cells. So it becomes kind of much easier and much simpler. I think that interface would be little more interactive, a little more easy to maintain, easy to manage, and just a little more intuitive.
Cool, nice. Yeah, I think that's some great feedback. So we'll definitely, hopefully the creator of the app is watching, and you can sort of take some of that into account, and we'll try and share this with you afterwards as well. But generally, it's a nice idea. Cool. All right, let's have a look. So we've got the developer. We've got Michael from. How do you pronounce the app? It's ETAO Keyboard. What do you call it?
Michael, you're muted.
Hey, we'll just let you wave. Okay, cool. So let's try and set it up. So I'm just I'm going to grab the phone and see if I can figure out how it goes. Have you already installed it, Roman?
Yes, I have. I played around with it. I have a bunch of comments, but I do want to make sure Michael or Mikhail is able to speak and he's not muted.
Let's give it a test. Oh, some computer problems. Okay, Michael says he's got some computer problems, but hopefully he'll be able to comment.
Yeah, so I do have it installed. I can go through some feedback on my end if you guys would like.
Yeah, please.
Actually, he just left.
He's probably going to try and get back in.
Okay, let's should we do the other app as well before, or?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's try AnyDo while we're waiting for Michael to get back on. Let's have a look. Yeah, AnyDo. All right, so let's have a look at it on the
I'll be back in a
phone.
second.
Everyone's disappearing. Oh look, Roman's gone, but his mustache has been left behind. It's a neat trick. Okay, so this is AnyDo. Let's have a look. So right away, as we start it up, we can see that they've done some custom stuff here. So it's a custom font, custom sort of dialogue come up. Very, very, very long terms of service. Very, very long terms of service. So the first thing I would say is that's a really long terms of service for terms and privacy. It's good to have a privacy policy. You can actually put your privacy policy in Google Play. That's an option, which might be able to save some of the text you have here by putting it onto Google Play directly for developers to be able to look at. In any case, we've kind of got this customized dialogue, even down to the buttons to define and accept. Now, personally, I think for something like this, you're better off using sort of a more standard system dialogue, but granted, I think that we're going to find that the whole UI is quite custom. In terms of the buttons generally,
the buttons, it seems they're triple coded right now, right? So they're location coded, they're color coded, they're size coded, and it seems a little bit over the top.
Yeah, a little bit.
If you follow platform conventions, have the affirmative action on the right, dismissive action on the left, so that location coding should actually be sufficient.
So you think the color is a bit much, plus it's bigger, plus it's in bold?
Exactly, plus it's in bold. That's quadruple coded.
Quadruple coded. So yeah, people definitely get it that accept is what you want them to do. But I'd say there's probably two alternatives. You can either just have just accept, like if it's that important, that's really the only thing that you want. You have accept, and the back button is sort of an implied cancel. Yes. So that's one approach. Or at the very least, if you do want to make sure that they are both there and available, just make them decline and accept respectively without sort of, it's asymmetrical, and that's bothering me. Like it looks wrong because it's
that would be
different.
my comment as well. That the different font sizes, font weights make it look very unbalanced.
Yeah, exactly. And for an app which I suspect is going to, like the UI, I think is going to be a big part of this, you want to avoid anything which sort of throws that balance off. So let's accept and move in. Hopefully I haven't just signed my life away. Okay, so it looks fairly straightforward in terms of I've got an empty screen, it's got today, and then up the top it says I want to. So let's type something in. I want to go home. Okay, cool. So as I'm typing, it's coming up with a whole bunch of auto-suggests, which look like they might be scrollable but aren't. I suspect if I pull the keyboard away, then they will be. No? Okay. All right, so that's quite neat. So right here, I can click on this and it'll auto-complete for me. Now at this point, it's not entirely clear how I add this to my list. I guess it's got share, remind, and add. So if I press add, it adds it to the list, which is quite nice. Again, this is all very custom by the looks of it. There was I don't know if you saw it on the screen, but there was a neat little sort of drop-down animation as it went into place. And it's also added a bunch of other ones. If I click on it, then it gives me, again, a bunch of options here, priority, folder, reminder. So I guess these are actions that I can take on that particular note. So I see. So priority is a toggle, so it's high priority or low priority, I guess.
Yeah.
Folder lets me move into a folder. So again, we've got this custom dialog fragment, hopefully, which lets us choose which folder we want to put it in. So I'm not sure about this, and so you can create new folder or cancel. So again, cancel is almost redundant because you can hit back to get out of that. I kind of don't like that choosing something straight away. Like I feel like I want to be able to accept it somehow, like choose a folder and hit OK rather than choosing a folder implicitly being the action, but yeah, it could be personal taste. Otherwise, it seems pretty simple. I see they've not done an action bar. That seems like a conscious choice to just have their sort of action as one thing at the top. That's certainly an approach. We have the menu button of shame down the bottom, which does do something. So this is interesting. So if I press the menu button, it's actually changing my UI. Please don't. Is my feedback there? This is definitely not what I would expect, and it throws me straight away.
I was also wondering what that looks like on the tablet. I didn't have a chance to look at it on the tablet.
Let's have a look on the tablet and see what it does there. Oops. All right, go back to the home screen. Any-do. All right, so we got the tablet here. All right, so menu button does exactly the same thing. Yeah. So it's kind of confusing on a number of levels. So as you can see here, we've got sort of these two pseudo menu items which have come up on the bottom where you would expect them to on a legacy app. And you've got a bunch of other settings, so how to sort by date, folder, priority. Yeah, definitely not the way that I would expect this to be laid out, particularly because, yeah, so it's toggleable. So if I hit the menu button again, the menu goes away, which is, again, kind of unexpected. Menu button isn't a toggle. It's something that should bring up the menu. And on Ice Cream Sandwich, it should bring up an overflow menu. This shouldn't be there. It should be part of the action bar. Yeah, I mean, do you have some specific feedback around that, Roman, or in fact you, Jens?
Yeah.
It's bothering me, but I'm finding it difficult to put into words.
Well, I mean, definitely the menu is, if you have that legacy menu, I mean, first of all, you shouldn't have the legacy menu, but on older devices, if you look at the Nexus S, that menu button, it should not do that. It should do, if it does something, then it should show the standard kind of 4-pack, 6-pack options menu. But in general, I mean, like you mentioned, on Android 3.0 and later, you simply shouldn't have that menu there. And what that menu does now is it really shows kind of like a settings screen, but there's also, which is confusing, there's another settings screen if you press more. So there's kind of two levels of settings. So what I would probably do is this initial settings screen, I would bake in the individual pieces, like the sorting. I think the sorting, and there's one other thing in there. 1 second. The sorting and those actions, I'd bake those into the something like an action bar. For sorting, you can have like a UI, like a widget on screen that lets you, has like a little drop down that says, oh, date, folder, priority. For clear, sync, and done, I guess clear is an action. Done is navigational, so you may want to have that somewhere in the top left of the screen, or as a drop down to see what view you're looking at, what view of notes you're looking at. Mm-hmm. But then once you get into things like feedback and more, those are clearly action bar items, or if you have something like an action overflow, then you press that and you see those. And then settings also should be in that action overflow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these settings in particular, again, this has all been customized, and obviously they've gone to some length here to make sure that the entire app is got a really custom look and feel. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If it looks nice, I think that's a good thing. But with things like dialogues and things like settings, there's a certain expectation from users that it'll work in a way that they're familiar with. And so you really have to think long and hard about whether or not there's any value in creating your own custom settings, which is just going to be confusing for people. So for things like sound, there is a way that you would expect that to come up, and in fact they've used the system menu here for that. So if I go back and show you that again, sound, and I click on that, it brings up the notification picker. So now, all of a sudden, even though everything else is customized, we're now back into a system dialog. So the system dialog is the right thing to display here. It's absolutely the right way to choose the notification sound. But rather than making it the very last thing you see, this whole settings menu should already be using that standard systems settings option. People will understand how to look for it and how it all works.
I think this is also a good place for mentioning how you can sort of rein in overly long lines in your landscape tablet views. If you look at Android Gmail, for example, we are using what we call center drawing. So we sort of compress the dialog or the form horizontally a bit in order to make everything more proportional and correctly weighted. So usually we have a left and a right gutter that looks like a piece of paper on a gray background.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
One thing I want to mention, I just want to mention really quickly that Beautiful Notes, which is an app that we looked at before, their settings were not themed, and I actually really appreciated that because settings is kind of like one of these holy places in an app. There are things like settings, like notifications, launcher icons throughout the system that really should almost, beyond just feel the same, they should really look and feel kind of very consistent. And so Beautiful Notes did a good job of that, and I think this app can take a page out of their book.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a temptation. I was a UI engineer in a previous life, and there's a big temptation once you start building custom things to make everything custom. It's like, why stop here? We can make our own scroll bars. We can make our own everything. I get that. I definitely appreciate that feeling of like, well, we want to make it all consistent. But as Roman says, there is a place to draw the line, and it's where there is something which is always consistent between apps. Dialogue, settings, even the action bar, and menus, like all of these things are pretty much consistent across apps. Even some of the Google apps, which can be quite different in terms of their UI, the sort of key elements should at least be consistent across everything. So you know that if you press something on the top right that looks like it should bring down an overflow menu, it does. And it looks the same. And it's got a settings button, and you bring that up, and it brings up that same settings view that you're used to from everything else.
And it really helps users to be in a, to feel at home in a structured and recognizable environment, so that they know, well, those are actions, and this is the overflow, and this is the navigation bar.
Yeah.
So it really helps you in the long run to sort of, reproduce those recognizable elements from other apps in your app as well.
Exactly. So, do take advantage of those things which are consistent across, like, every app. Don't try and recreate the wheel in those instances. As Roman says, Beautiful Notes is a great example because it has a very custom UI which looks nice, but certain things are consistent, are the same. So that's an approach that I think works really, really well.
But I really want to give a shout out here for, let me hold that in the camera, and you showed it before real quick.
Down there.
For the actual sentence completion.
Yeah, that's
it works
really nice.
really well. I was really impressed with that. Cool stuff.
Yeah, I mean that I think is kind of the killer feature of this app, right?
Especially since it's multi-level, so you can tap on here and actually
like in Bank of America.
Down
nice.
to the bank.
There was an issue with that, actually. I think on my phone here, it's not actually showing the text for this person's icon. Something that's just a bug, but it might just be some sort of like, I don't know, some sort of bug. But
interesting. But yeah, so that's really nice. And in fact, of all of this whole app, like that's the killer feature is the fact that it can save you time. So when you're trying to take a quick note down, it's going to guess what it is you want to say and do that. I'd be really interested to know if it learns based on what you're entering in or what other people have entered in. It does bring up the question of what is happening to the stuff that I'm typing. which is probably a good reason to read that really long privacy policy in terms of service at the beginning. So that might be an interesting thing to check out. But yeah, so overall, the whole app had, again, like Beautiful Notes, and it seems to be pretty consistent around apps which do a lot of customization. It's a little slow, it's a little laggy. There's a lot of nice little animations which look nice, but they seem to slow the whole system down. So again, I'd be, if I was going to focus on something, it would be on trying to make the whole thing more responsive, less janky, sort of smoother. That can be as important, if not more important, than the overall look and feel, is how smooth and how quickly it all operates.
I want to make one last point. So around action bars, I'm just looking at this app and I'm trying to think, like, what would it take for, like, how hard would it be to just add an action bar? And I think basically, I mean, that microphone button, can probably just go into the text box, kind of like what we do with Search View. And in the top left, you could probably have that icon, right? But just purely from styling, the action bar doesn't have to look like a separate bar, right? You can set the background to something like transparent. You can set the Windows content overlay, which is the shadow underneath the action bar, to null. And so the action bar basically becomes kind of this floating thing. And so it can take on the same appearance basically as what you see here, but kind of feel more correct navigationally and interactionally. And then you automatically get that action overflow in the top right. So I think that it wouldn't require too much extra work to make this an actual action bar, but just in case you don't do that, for sure, make sure the top left is reserved for things like navigation, and top right for actions and that overflow. So that's the last point I want to make on action bar there.
Cool. All right, so we've got very little time remaining, but seeing as we have Michael here, I do want to take a look at the keyboard. So you actually have it on yours. Excellent. Let's drop it in front. In fact, I'll do you a favor. See if we can move our camera setup a little bit closer to you as well. Nice. All right, I'll move it this way so that we're not blocking the camera. Okay. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the keyboard? What's the thinking behind it? What does it do that that a conventional keyboard doesn't? Michael, you're muted at the moment. You're not muted. Is that what you're saying? It's just not working? That's a shame. If you like, because we're actually just coming up to the end of our time, would you prefer we can hold this off and do it first next week and give you a chance to get a working mic? Yeah, that works for you. Cool. All right, I think that makes sense because we're at 1:45, which is usually our cutoff time. I guess with that, thanks for joining us, Michael, this week. We'll definitely look at your keyboard first thing next week. Thanks to everyone who's watching. We're trying to collect analytics. I'm not sure how well that's working, so if you are watching, you want to give us a +1 on either the YouTube stream or on the G+ stream, that will be fantastic. Thank you, Professor Roman, for joining us this week from San Francisco. Thank you, Jens, for coming on board as well.
Thanks for having me.
Great stuff. Everyone else, we do this every Friday at 1 p.m. We have a moderator page where we take nominations from app developers who would like to have their apps reviewed by us. So please do go ahead and add your apps in there, and we will go through and pick the top 4 or 5 voted ones each week and check them out for you. Do hang around. We've got Fred and Ian going to be with us in about 15 minutes doing pretty much the same thing, but with a little more fun, a little more beer, and looking at games. So definitely hang around and check that out. Otherwise, tune in next week, and we will see you then.